All right, well, let's talk some guitars. I think you have a few treats lurking that you've brought into your domicile for us to go. If I was going to ask you about, you've got a signature guitar that looks really cool. It kind of looks like a Moserite Telecaster on the highway to Gretchville-ish.
Yeah. Well, the Hallmark company, run by a friend of mine in Maryland, he had reissued some old 60s guitars, the Hallmark Swept Wing and a few other things like that. And I said, hey, let's do a new signature model. And I basically want it to be like Joe Mapus's double neck Moserite, but as a single neck guitar. And so we sort of imagined that as a Telecaster meets a Moserite sort of a thing. And I love it. I mean, as far as new guitars go, it's like the closest thing you could get to having something like that made for you in 1959 or something. And
cool.
I've traveled all over the world with that thing, and it's a great instrument, I have to say.
Awesome. Are they readily available, or how does that work?
No. The Hallmark company is kind of one of these small boutique companies, and so we've had them made in real small batches and currently sold out. But we're going to try to get another batch together. I mean, we were talking about it before all this coronavirus thing happened.
Right, before the pestilence.
Yeah. So hopefully we can get another batch out there and sold before the locusts.
Right. Now, I saw another guitar that you were playing, and it looked like a big kind of a Gibson-y arch-toppy thing with a Bigsby and soap bars. But was that also a Hallmark? Was that a special made thing?
No. So, getting into this whole Merle Travis thing, I thought to myself, man, I've always wanted a Gibson Super 400, but, Super 400s are ridiculously expensive. And I should mention to the people out there who are unfamiliar with what we're talking about, Merle Travis played a Gibson Super 400. In fact, he ordered this customized Gibson Super 400 in 1952 that was not only the most expensive guitar that Gibson had ever made, it was actually the most expensive guitar ever made in history up to that point, which is kind of crazy to think about. So I wanted, a Gibson Super 400 like that. Make a long story short, I had this giant 18-inch blonde body, and I had it for a couple of years. And then I got this guy, Terry MacArthur in Nashville to make a neck for it, to finish it up. Put some vintage P90s that I had laying around in a drawer on it. And so I basically made a replica of an early 50s Gibson Super 400. And it's a beautiful guitar. Terry makes wonderful necks. So I've really been enjoying that and, doing my whole Scotty Moore, Merle Travis thing.
Right. Cool. Well, do you have any of these things handy that we might be able to visualize, or did you grab some other things of interest?
I grabbed some other things of interest, and, I was even trying to think in terms of Wisconsin, so
yes.
I'll try to make this story very brief. There was a guitar player, a country guitar player named Geno King, and he played with a bunch of people back in the old days. He played with Little Jimmy Dickens for about 15 years. He played with Carl Smith. He played with Ray Price. Just one of those kind of career country players. And there was this album by him that you'd find every now and then called Bang Bang Guitar by Geno King. And
look at that.
Holding this double neck Moserite on the cover. And you can tell by looking at the cover, this is a pretty unusual one. It's like bird's eye maple with a walnut stripe down the center of it. And I thought, man, how cool is that? So I tracked Geno down. He was living in a sort of subsidized retirement home, just in downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And he was from up in that area originally. And, he had wound up there again in his later years. And he was in pretty bad shape. He had lived pretty hard life. But, I went up to this place, said, I want to spend some time with you, just talk to you about guitars, see your scrapbook, whatever. And he was one of these guys that had no filter. And the first words out of his mouth when we started looking through his scrapbook were talking about a very famous female country singer and how good she was in the oral department. And it just kind of... It kept going like that for about 4 hours, just stories of him taking LSD. And, it made me realize so these country Western guys were They were
Pirates.
Absolutely on a par with Keith Richards or Johnny Thunders.
Sure.
Absolutely. The only difference is that, you know, then they were all like Baptists or Methodists. And so
Right.
you know, then they had to be like, they couldn't really talk about that stuff or brag about it. But
Right.
they all, you know, this guy had stories that literally would blow your hat off in the creek. So I asked him about this Moserite double neck, and he said, well, he was touring with Leroy Van Dyke in the mid 70s. And Leroy was jealous of the double neck because it was getting more attention than he was. So Leroy forced him to sell the double neck in Colorado when they were on the road. And he was brokenhearted about it. Well, I went home maybe 4 or 5 months later, a Moserite double neck popped up in Colorado, bird's eye maple, walnut stripe. I'm like, that's Gino's guitar. That's Gino's guitar. I have to buy this guitar and get it back to him somehow. And so I bought the guitar on eBay. I was actually going back up there to play that casino in Green Bay that we used to play all the time. So
Chunk Casino.
Yeah, made a special trip to La Crosse, and at the time I kind of thought I would just like give it back to him, you know. And man, when I got up there, he was in such bad shape. I knew that he didn't really have very long to live. So we made an arrangement with Dave, you know, from Dave's guitar shop up there. And he was a super solid guy, very cool guy. He made a big sort of, honorary display, displaying the guitar and Gino's albums. And Gino came down there and we took pictures of him with the guitar, and he cried. And then he died about 6 weeks after that.
Oh.
But it was a really amazing thing to put that guitar back in his hand. So I have that guitar right here. I'll show you.
Yes.
This is the 1965 Moserite double neck that little Jimmy Dickens bought for Gino King. And let's see if I can scroll back. It's
That's glorious.
as far as, if you've seen these things before, this one's pretty unusual, not only for the bird's eye maple and the walnut stripe. It's got an extra knob down here, an extra switch. But maybe my favorite detail on this is the back. It's got this purple.
Oh, look at that.
Sunburst. I mean, it's just crazy. So
there must not have been a whole lot of double neck Moserites made, right?
You know, there's more than you would think. I always like to joke that there's actually way more supply than there is demand. Every time some store gets a Moserite double neck in, they eagerly contact Deke Dickerson. I'm like, dude, I have like 4 of these things, man. I don't really need another Moserite double neck. But the Gino King one is just so beautiful. And I have to say that, you know, the 6-string neck is okay, but the 12-string neck on that thing is by far the best electric 12-string I have ever played. It sounds fantastic. It's better than any Rickenbacker I've ever played. I know, don't get mad at me. But if you put your hands on this thing, man, that's a magic neck right there.
Excellent. That's an awesome story.
Yep. And, I wish that I could publish all of Gino's,
memoirs,
Nashville Babylon stories that he told me, but I can't. But if any of you see me at a show in person sometime and you want to hear some of Gino's stories, I can tell you a few that will entertain you.
Yes, indeed. Well, what else do you have handy?
Let me see here. Well, okay. Are you a fan of Link Ray at all?
Yes, absolutely.
So I wrote a chapter in my first Strat in the Attic book about this guitar. Link had a few guitars. He recorded Rumble in 1957 with a Gibson Gold Top Les Paul.
Okay.
And then right after that, he bought a Dan Electro guitar Lin, which is commonly referred to as the Longhorn. And he took a couple of really famous, iconic pictures of Link Ray holding this Dan Electro Longhorn guitar. And, nobody knew what happened to the guitar. There basically weren't any photos of that guitar after 1961 or 62. It just kind of disappeared. And then all of a sudden, one day, this guitar turned up on eBay with a very plausible story, and it was unplayable. There was a neck body joint that was just, completely screwed up. But the guy had this story that one of the members of Link Ray's band traded him this guitar for a stack of jazz albums in 1962. And so I bought the guitar on eBay. It wound up not selling for very much because it was in such poor condition. And, the provenance was sort of like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
Right.
But then I spent a couple of years trying to track down, the story on this thing. And what's interesting is that Wisconsin really plays a part in this because Link toured with his guitar in 1959. And there's there's pictures of him on tour in Wisconsin playing this Dan Electro Longhorn guitar. Now, when I got the thing, if we have any guitar geeks here, I'm sure we do, you know how Dan Electro bridges operate. It's kind of a unique design. They've got this plate, and then it sits on top of two screws in the front, and then it's got a screw going down through it in the back, right?
Right.
Well, now, if you're an idiot and you're on the road like a teenage rock and roll guy, you can't really figure out how this thing works. So then you just wind up putting all three screws in the top of the bridge. Well, then it's too low. It's not sitting upright. So that's how it was when I got it. I took it to a guy named Steve Sost, who's a Dan Electro expert out here. And he said, hey, you're not going to believe this, but look what was underneath the string, the bridge on this thing. There was a matchbook to a bank in the DC area of Virginia, which is where Link lived.
Right.
And then there was a matchbook from a pizza place in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I'm not making this up. And so I'm like, okay, these are very good clues. So then I set out to try to find out if Link had ever played in La Crosse. And what I found out by going there, this is like the third time that I went to La Crosse after visiting with Gino, was that there was a place there that was the main concert venue. Everybody played there. And if you turned right out of the parking lot and drove half a block down, there was the pizza place where that matchbook cover came from. And I never could find out if Link actually played at that place in 1959. But I did find out that he played in all these other cities in Wisconsin with the Longhorn during that period of time in 1959. Now, I could keep going with all these little guitar geeky details. You'll have to read the chapter in the book for that. But basically, I'm about 99% sure that this is Link Wray's Dan Electro guitar. So let me grab it.
Excellent.
This is it. And like I said, he didn't play rumble on this thing, but this is the guitar that he used on Rawhide and a bunch of the records that he made for Epic Records in 1958 and 1959.
Awesome.
And then he had a few other weird guitars after that. He had a Super dual tone. He had a Gibson Firebird, and then went on to play like some weird Yamaha guitars and things like that later on. But when I got it, it had no knobs on it. And I was looking at these pictures where, see if I can angle this so you can see the glare. He had these red knobs on his Dan Electro, and I couldn't figure that out. And then I remembered that he played one of those Premier amps from the 50s. And I saw a picture of one of those on Reverb, and sure enough, there were those red knobs on the Premier amp. And so, again, after scouring the internet for a while, I finally found some Premier amp knobs to put on there, just like he had back in the 1950s. Because
perfect.
If you know anything about those original Dan Electro concentric volume tone things with the little pointer knob, those pointer knobs just fall off immediately. You can never find those.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so there's another Wisconsin tie-in as he dragged this thing all around Wisconsin in 1959. And
I'm sure. Debauched activities in Wisconsin.
Well, and you know what's really weird is that Buddy Holly did the tour, the Winter Dance Party, in February 1959, and then those three guys got killed in the plane crash in Clear Lake, Iowa.
Right.
And like literally 2 weeks later, Link Wray and all these guys, they're on the Spring Dance Party tour put on by the same people. Like they didn't slow down at all. Like, oh yeah, we had a plane crash and a bunch of guys died, but here's our next tour. And can you imagine how you would have felt like Link Ray and those guys, like, yeah, we're playing the same places where all those other guys did.
Oh man,
crazy, huh?
But the history of the stuff is wild.
Well, some people appreciate it. I'm sure we've probably put a sleepy, glazed look on some people's look out there.
Oh, I don't think so. It's all fascinating.